Hello, my name is Scott Muska. I am the General Counsel and Legal Director at the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority. In this episode of In Brief, I'm going to discuss at a basic level the why and how of setting utility rates, including a review of the legal framework that guides rate setting. So first, why? Why does Pura set utility rates? The answer is natural monopolies. In Connecticut, these include electric utilities such as Eversource and UI, and a couple other local systems. Water utilities such as Aquarian, Connecticut Water Company, and also other local systems. And finally, gas utilities, Connecticut Natural Gas, Southern Connecticut Gas, and Yankee Gas, as well as some other smaller systems. We use the term natural monopolies because these monopolies did not arise from anti-competitive behavior of a market participant. Rather, the infrastructure required to deliver electric, water, and gas service is simply not conducive to a free market. You can imagine the inefficiencies of having multiple gas, water, and electric companies in your street. One question that we receive frequently is whether Pura sets rates for all electric, gas, and water utilities in Connecticut. The answer is no. Certain utilities are not subject to Pura rate setting authority. For example, municipal systems are exempt. They're operated by cities and towns and have their own governance and accountability structure. Others, like cable and telephone, are now considered competitive markets. Similarly, electric supply in internet and wireless are either deregulated or are regulated at the federal level. Instead, Pura generally has jurisdiction over what we call investor-owned utilities, including, as I noted previously, Eversource, UI, Yankee, SCG, CNG, Aquarian, and Connecticut Water. Now let's turn to the how of rate setting. To understand the how, we need to actually go all the way back to the Constitution, more precisely, the Bill of Rights. And you may be wondering what the Bill of Rights says about utility rates. Well, absolutely nothing. But the Fifth Amendment and the 14th Amendment establish the principle that a state cannot deprive a person of their property without just compensation. And this principle of just compensation is fundamental to utility rate setting. Over the decades, as utility services have expanded, a robust amount of jurisprudence has developed around this principle. Two Supreme Court cases in particular receive a lot of attention. They're often referred to as simply Bluefield and Hope. These cases, along with many others, have established a fairly simple standard that the just compensation clause requires that utilities have a reasonable opportunity to recover prudently incurred costs and a reasonable rate of return on capital invested in the public interest. Connecticut, as well as many other states, have codified the standard in their statutes. So let's break down this into the two components. First, utilities are allowed to recover prudently incurred costs. During the regular course of business, a utility incurs costs each year. And the three main categories are operations and maintenance, or O&M, depreciation, and taxes. So during a rate case, the authority receives evidence on the amount of cost the utility will incur in future years. This is the amount of money that the utility requires to essentially keep the lights on, pardon the pun. Now, the second component is a reasonable rate of return on capital. Every business requires capital to operate. Utilities in particular are capital-intensive businesses due to the massive amount of infrastructure required to deliver utility services. The invested capital is known as rate base for the utilities. Like any business, utilities fund their capital with debt and equity. Debt is money borrowed from banks or other lenders at specific interest rates, while equity is money contributed by shareholders. If you ever purchased a house, you have made a similar capital investment. Typically, you will make a down payment of equity in the range of 10 to 30%, and then use debt for the remaining 70 to 90%. For a variety of reasons that go beyond this presentation, utilities typically operate at about a 50-50 debt to equity ratio, with a range anywhere from 40 to 60%. The cost of debt is fairly easy to determine because it's typically the actual interest rate on the debt instrument and is dictated by market conditions and typically ranges from 4 to 8%. The cost of equity, or return on equity, or ROE, is much more complicated and again goes beyond this presentation. But in a rate case, the authority will examine evidence on what constitutes a reasonable ROE. And recently, ROEs have been in the range of 8 to 12%. To determine the utility's total rate of return, the authority takes the weighted cost of average of the debt and equity and multiplies that by the amount of the utility's rate base. So, at some point during the rate case, the authority makes findings as to the total amount of prudently incurred costs and the return on capital. By adding these two components together, we get the utility's revenue requirement. This is the amount the utility needs to collect from ratepayers each year to cover its costs and to provide a reasonable return to shareholders. Now, this is not the end of the process. The authority will still need to develop specific rates for each customer class, but that too is beyond this presentation. So this is a very high-level overview of utility rate setting. Rate cases usually take between 7 to 10 months, involve thousands of pages of evidence and weeks of hearings. But this gives you a basic understanding of the why and how of PURA setting utility rates. Thank you for watching.